is like one of like the little notes I love about like history.
He's the money man of the company.
He was very instrumental in buying all of the property in Florida. I don't think a lot of people know who he is.
Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we are talking about Roy Disney, the unsung hero of the Walt Disney Company.
Roy, you are getting sung about. We're gonna sing about you. Do you like this song? I hope you do.
What was that?
You said he was an unsung hero.
So you thought you had to write like a song about him, like how like people write songs about famous battles and stuff? You thought like let me write the song of Roy Disney. Is this like
no,
Lin-Manuel Miranda?
I just realized. You know what I need?
When he does like Alexander Hamilton, he's like he needs a musical.
You know
I need a Roy Disney musical.
I want a Roy Disney Sea Shanty.
Okay, well you can work on that.
I don't think I could handle that, but
I think we need a full musical. I think he needs the full Hamilton treatment here.
I want a listener who is talented in songwriting to send us their Roy Disney Sea Shanty.
Send them all to us.
Yeah,
send them over to us on Instagram at Enchanted Podcast.
You can use all the information or some of the information we include in this podcast or none of it.
Yeah, but would love to hear it. All right, but before we get into that, let's cover some news. Now, I'm not covering Disney news this week, covering Universal news, because a few weeks ago, Universal finally unveiled Epic Universe in Florida, which is going to be opening next year. And everybody knows they've been building it. Like they knew Epic Universe, and Universal had announced Epic Universe, but now we've gotten some more like details, official names of the lands, and more concept art around it.
Well, we've joked and talked about this before, though. Universal seems to have it right, because Disney announces stuff and then doesn't build it, and then it's disappointing. But Universal will just be like, what? We're not doing nothing, but you can clearly see that they are.
Well, they did. So they did announce Epic Universe, but they didn't announce anything that was in it besides Super Nintendo World. So in addition to Super Nintendo World, we're getting the Ministry of Magic, so another Harry Potter themed land, How to Train Your Dragon, Dark Universe, which would be like the Universal monsters, and then Celestial Park, which is going to be the middle. Celestial Park will have a roller coaster, a carousel attraction, and a water play area.
The carousel attraction looks awesome because it's like all...
It's constellations.
Yeah, it's constellations. And so the animals that you're riding on are animals, but they are also stars. And so they're like very whimsical. They're different than a lot of other carousels that you see. And also it looks like they're like, it's open. It doesn't have like a center piece.
Yeah, it looks
it's cool.
Like a modified. Yeah, it's a more modern like kind of carousel. Idea.
It's a cool idea.
I think they showed some more concept art about the lands, like the different portals. They really do all have cool entry points. How they're like these portals.
It's almost like the spoke, like in Walt Disney World. How like there's that center, and then like
the Celestial Park's going to be in the middle, and everything's going to go off of that. My kind of comment is, and everybody's like very excited about this, and had a couple of weeks to kind of like digest it and kind of think about it a little bit more. But my thought is there going to be enough to do in this park? And, I feel like even recent parks like Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom, like when they open, I think a lot of people say, oh, they're half-day parks, because it costs so much just to build a few attractions that they open with that it takes a while to kind of flesh it out. But like if you look at it, the Celestial Park, which is one of 5 lands, so there's only 5 lands in this thing. It has one roller coaster, a carousel, the water play area, and like a restaurant, and that's it. And it's the whole spine of the park. And so these other lands now, Super Nintendo World, I think is probably gonna have the most stuff, because you're getting a Mario Kart attraction, you're getting the Yoshi attraction, you're getting the Donkey Kong attraction.
What's the Yoshi one again?
The Yoshi one's basically like you're just like riding around on a Yoshi. It's like a
kid's ride.
Yeah, it's like an Omni mover where you're just like on a Yoshi. So it's a cool view of the park. But so they'll have a couple attractions there. So like each of these lands I think is going to have 1 or 2 attractions and a restaurant, and it's like, is that enough to sustain a park? So I'm interested to see the response to this once it opens of is it going to be, it looks great, but there's not a lot to do. I think it's going to be so crowded, the lines are going to be long, and so it's not going to be a half-day park because you're going to be waiting in line for a long time. But if you look at the concept art, there is a ton of trees in between each of these lands. Like there's big gaps in between these lands, which leads me to believe they have huge expansion plots available.
Zelda.
that they'll
please put Zelda in.
Yeah, Zelda. I mean, Zelda may go into Islands of Adventure, but I think it's going to open, and I think it'll be somewhat. I mean, I don't want to call it bare bones because you're going to get a lot, but like it seems like they have a lot of space to expand. That over the next decade, I think as this thing kind of grows, it'll get bigger. But that was kind of my thing. Is like, yeah, it's exciting, but is there really going to be enough to do to go repeatedly and to have a full day experience there?
I see your point there, and I think that you're right. It's going to be super crowded. I mean, we went to the one in California. They're building
just the Super Nintendo World.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I'm talking about the whole park. Like
but I'm
dark,
just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I think is going to be your most popular park.
Well, I think you have that. I think you have the Harry Potter. I think will be popular. I mean, I think the Dark Universe, the Universal Monsters. I haven't heard much of like any even exciting attractions there. So it's almost like if I don't visit like that one, like if people don't go, I feel like people aren't going to go there. So now you're down to 4. And again, the main center of the park is just a roller coaster. So if you're not like roller coasters, you're going to skip that. So yeah, I think Nintendo's going to be packed. How to Train Your Dragon looks pretty cool. I think that'll be crowded, and the Ministry of Magic. So, but it's like you're going to have everybody trying to go to 3 lands, and that's the thing. It's like, how long is it going to take you to really get through 3 lands? Now, when it's crowded, it's going to take you a long time, but when it's not super crowded, like once it wears off, how long is it going to take you to go through 3 lands? When we were at Super Nintendo World, we kind of rope dropped it in Hollywood, and within 2 hours, we had done everything there. 3 hours maybe tops.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we got close to doing everything.
Yeah, and so it's like, again, if you're only spending 2 hours in a land.
If it hadn't been so crowded, though, I would have wanted to spend more time there. It was a very enjoyable place, very immersive. They built it so big that you're totally encapsulated in it. So I'm really excited to see what they do in Universal Studios Florida, because I think that they are making this one bigger. I think it's going to be their biggest one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. It's just a matter of, this is the problem that I have with theme parks in general, is just that I love being in those places, but I don't love being surrounded by that many people.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see once this comes out. So it's exciting. I think everybody's waiting now for like what's Disney's response to this. Are they going to announce changes at Walt Disney World, expansions, a 5th park? They didn't announce anything at their recent earnings call a couple of weeks ago. They still reiterated their desire to increase capital spending in the park. So we'll see. We have a D23 coming up. Maybe there'll be some big news there. But even if they announce something big, it's not going to be open. Epic Universe is opening 2025. It's opening within a year here. Like Disney's not going to have a response to that within a year. It's going to take them some time to have like a true response to what Epic Universe does. And maybe they're looking at it. Maybe they're going to take a wait and see approach and wait till this thing opens and see if it really moves the needle. Because maybe people do go there and it goes, hey, I don't need to go. It's not as maybe exciting as I thought. It's maybe not drawing the crowds. And then Disney's like, hey, we don't need to spend any money.
Right. Or, I mean, there is also a strategy, which I like, instead of both of them trying to open up big things at the same time to compete, couldn't it also be beneficial if they sort of just take turns? Like if Universal opens Epic Universe and then Disney waits a few years and then they open something big, Universal's going to get the residual crowds.
No, they both want to win. They both want to win because the whole thing is like they're trying to draw crowds from each other. So it'll be interesting.
I could see a scenario in which everybody wins.
I mean, I think ultimately they do. I mean, more people down there, it's going to help. If people are down there for Epic Universe and it's too crowded, you're going to go to Disney. But like they want to draw the crowd. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Does Disney's wait and see approach work out, or is it something like Harry Potter? Whenever they opened Hogsmeade and nobody thought twice about Universal Studios, and then all of a sudden it became like the go-to park, and Disney was caught completely flat-footed, and then all of a sudden they had to put all this stuff into motion to kind of counterbalance it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this.
Yeah, it will be.
All right, so let's get into our main topic here, Roy Disney. And I want to thank Ben, one of our listeners. He messaged us on Instagram.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
And said, hey, would love to hear an episode about Roy Disney. And I think that's a great idea. And what I really liked about it is...
what I'm hearing is Ben gets a byline on my song.
The song that you're asking other people to write.
No. The song that I wrote at the top of the episode.
Oh, okay.
Ben, you can have the rights to that song as well.
Now I have to keep it in. I could have cut it, but now you referenced it as a callback, so now I have to keep it in the episode.
Yeah, well, it was straight fire, so you have to.
Okay, well, it's in there now.
And Ben helped me write it.
It's okay. Thank you, Ben.
Ben's like, I'm stopping listening right now. I don't want credit for that.
But Roy really is the unsung hero. And please don't sing again. But
I missed an opportunity.
But I think, Walt, everybody knows Walt Disney, and the Walt Disney Company, I think, and Walt are like so intertwined that I don't know that a lot of people know about Roy. Unless you're like a really hardcore Disney fan, you don't know about Roy.
Well, I mean, considering that my students didn't realize that Walt Disney is a real person, then yeah, I'm gonna go with they don't.
They're very young, but what I'm saying, like most people know Walt Disney. He's very prominent, but there wouldn't be the Walt Disney Company if it wasn't for Roy Disney.
Yeah.
And so I think it is nice to kind of shine a spotlight on his contributions and kind of talk about how he was influential in like Walt's life and the company in general, because like he helped the company in a lot of ways and he complimented Walt very well in a lot of ways that really helped the company grow. So Roy O. Disney, because his son was Roy E. Disney, so there's a couple Roy Disneys here, but Roy O. Disney was Walt's brother.
I feel like we should just call him Roy O.
There you go. He was born June 24th, 1893 in Chicago, Illinois, so he's 8 years older than Walt. And he served in the Navy during World War I from 1917 to 1919. He was discharged from the Army due to tuberculosis. And this is why... What are you making that face for?
Because I didn't realize at that point in time you recovered from tuberculosis.
Yeah, I think a lot of people recovered from tuberculosis. Like tuberculosis is one of those things where I feel like it was like you just went out in the wilderness and like got fresh air, and that was like the cure for tuberculosis.
I don't know. I just feel like every old timey like piece of
Everybody had
literature,
it.
all
the Oregon Trail, you died from typhoid fever and tuberculosis.
Yeah, like, and I feel like it was
game.
like, I mean, like every woman that I could think of is just like, oh no, I have tuberculosis.
Yeah. Well, he survived, but that is actually why he was in California. So Roy had tuberculosis, he recovered, but he was in California because, again, I think like the
drier
air, the atmosphere
maybe.
And everything, like it was better for him. And that's the reason why Walt came to California. And this is like one of like the little notes I love about like history. And like you can do it in your own life too. Of like if you look back on your life and you just think like, okay, like where was I like 5 or 10 years ago? And where am I at today? Like what are all like the weird little things that happened? I was in this spot at this moment, and that's why XYZ happened, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
Good or bad, but like it's those are like the cool like things and moments in like history or in like people's lives that I like, of like, if this one thing didn't happen, like
so if Roy didn't have tuberculosis,
exactly,
Walt wouldn't have gone to California.
Potentially. I mean, he could have still potentially done it, but yeah, Roy had tuberculosis. He went to California. Walt Laugh-O-Gram Studios went bankrupt. He was kind of like, oh no, this thing I was doing didn't work. And Roy was like, why don't you come out to California with me and like we can do something together. And he goes out there and they start the Disney Brothers studio. And it's like, yeah, if he wasn't out there, would they have done it? Maybe they would have started, but would they have had the same connections because they weren't kind of like in Hollywood, California? Just like it's the cool little things like that like
I feel like this is like
see how they play out.
This is like a great premise for a show, and we could call it What If, maybe.
Disney needs to do What If everything. Like there's rumors that they're working on a
Star Wars
What If. Gold.
Yeah, that would be 100%. Amazing.
But they should do What If everything. You've talked about this. What if Mufasa didn't die? Like what if like what if Elsa didn't save Anna? Like you could take every Disney movie
and undo anything
and do a what if and be like, where does it go? I mean, like how they did with like the Olaf retells Disney movies. Just make like little 5 or 6 minute shorts of like, what if this didn't happen?
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. Although I feel like there's a risk as far as like the animated Disney movies of undoing things. I feel like with Star Wars, it's just like an interesting, and Marvel, it's
like a multiverse
thing. But I feel like
they've established the multiverse in Marvel that it
there's
works.
something about taking your animated classics and undoing them that I feel like would feel a little disillusioning. So I don't see them doing that.
I want to see the What If Little Mermaid, where what if Ariel had a pen and paper, and then it's a 3-minute movie.
What if
I can't talk, Sea Witch stole my voice.
What if Ariel decided, you know what, I actually don't know that boy.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot you could do with that one. So, but growing up, Roy and Walt shared a close bond. They actually shared a room together. So even though they're 8 years apart, they grew up. They shared a room together. Where they grew up in Marceline, their father Elias bought a paper route. So that was like his job, I guess. Back in the day, like you like bought routes to then, make money from. So like you probably paid some sort of like upfront fee. But Roy and Walt like helped deliver papers and stuff. So they were very close growing up. They worked together growing up. So it kind of like set the stage for their future business endeavors.
That's super interesting that there was enough money in that to
selling papers. Everybody had newspapers.
Were a big business.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting to see how things have changed.
That's how everybody got their news.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no TV.
There was no internet. Yeah.
There was no, internet. There was no television. You didn't have. You had radio.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did radio become a huge thing, though?
I think there was radio in the 1900s. Because again, Roy was born in 1893. When did the War of
the Worlds thing happen?
I feel like that was later, but
was it? Okay.
But I think Walt's born in 1901, Roy 1893. Like you had radio, but like again, there's no news programs, there's no internet, so like you had to get a newspaper. Like that was that was how you got everything. Like that was the way you kind of learned about what was going on.
So that was the War of the Worlds thing was 1938. So yeah, that was a lot later.
Right. So whether radio was real big or not, but yeah, like they worked together. They worked on this newspaper route. They also had like very complementary skills.
Yeah.
So it's very well noted that
was Walt baby.
Was a dreamer.
He was the baby of the family. Did he have a younger brother? No.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember. So I don't want to kind of like misquote things if he had a younger sibling or not.
Because I feel like that explains a little bit because, Roy was so much his senior and it tends to be, and again, this isn't always the case, but the older sibling a lot of times tends to be like very together, very organized, very like rule following and rule abiding. And then like the younger ones tend to be more dreamers, more like creative. I don't know. It's not necessarily, again, that's not a hard and fast rule, but it is an interesting thing because I notice that sometimes with kids, whenever I'm teaching them, like you can kind of tell their birth order sometimes based on what their personality is like.
Yeah, based on what they have. Yeah, Walt was, as is well documented, was a creative visionary. That's kind of what he did. So to your point, he was a dreamer. Whereas Roy was like a very practical businessman. He actually, I did not know this before kind of researching this. He actually had a job working as a bank clerk at the First National Bank of Kansas City. So he kind of was in business, worked in banking, and I think that kind of experience helped him a lot, especially like understanding banking, because he basically, at the Disney company, he was in charge of like all of the finances and basically funding all of Walt's dreams and everything Walt wanted to do. And so I think having that background as like a business person working at a bank really helped with that.
He's the money man of the company. Mm-hmm. So, that banking background would definitely be really useful and for Walt and what he needed it for. So,
yeah. And I don't know how many times specifically that Roy saved the company, but I feel like if you've ever read Walt Disney's biography by Neil Gabler, I feel like it's almost like every other chapter. It's like Disney was almost out of money and Roy helped raise the funds for it. Or, they got deals for their movies, or, he helped get the ABC investment for Disneyland and like all this sort of stuff. Or, he had to, Walt wanted to spend more and more and more on the movie, and he had to figure out how to make it work. And then, the movie made a ton of money. They all made it back. Like, it feels like, especially those early years of the company, they were always strapped for cash. It was always tight, but Roy somehow made it work. Like, I don't feel like Walt really worried about it. Like, I feel like he was like, oh, Roy will take care of it, to a certain extent. Like, we just need to keep doing what we need to do. But yeah, I feel like there's probably a half a dozen times that in those early decades, the Walt Disney Company could have went bankrupt, and we would not have anything we have today if it wasn't for Roy finding the funding, finding ways to keep it afloat, and being kind of the practical, Walt was dreaming. Roy was like, how do I make this a reality? I need to be practical about it. We need this, we need that. Like, what do we need to do to make this work?
Yeah. And I mean, Walt was very much like, if you can dream it, you can do it and make this happen. Like, even whenever you see the Imagineers and like the Imagineering stories of the different rides, it seems like everybody he interacted with, he'd just be like, here's a project, like, you can make this happen. And then everyone was just like, he had, I think, a certain kind of charisma that people wanted to make it happen too. So it's just like an interesting, sort of balance that the two of them were able to strike, because he had the personality, the charisma, the drive, the creativity, but also a little bit of like the pie in the skyness. And then Roy grounded him and was able to sort of draw things back and cover for him and stuff like that. So it's a really beautiful kind of relationship.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is it was, I think, so well done and such a fruitful relationship that, it often is kind of said that like one of the other like great times in the Disney company, just in terms of like everything firing on all cylinders, expansion, like everything kind of going well, was early in Michael Eisner's tenure when he brought on Frank Wells as kind of like his COO. And people kind of likened that to Walt and Roy, where like Eisner was like the creative Hollywood type kind of dreamer, and then Frank Wells was very much like the operational, like functional, this is what we need to do to get it done, to execute. And those two balance themselves out very well, and they're very complementary. And, that helped expand Walt Disney World and make it a vacation destination, that sort of stuff. And then when Frank Wells tragically died, Michael Eisner kind of absorbed all those roles and didn't have that balance. And then things kind of didn't go as well. Like they started running into issues because they didn't have that balance. And it's kind of like it worked with Walt and Roy. It seemed to work with Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. Maybe that's what Disney needs now. Maybe they need kind of like two strong people running the show, where when you have just one person, it maybe doesn't work as well. You need that dreamer to kind of like tie into Walt, but you need somebody practical kind of like to tie back into Roy.
So from a quick search, Walt was not the youngest child. He was the youngest son.
Okay.
So just, from the one website I checked, really great sources here, but seems like they had a bunch of kids.
Yeah. And then what was also interesting was, originally Roy had some ownership in the company, but Walt bought out most of Roy's shares in 1929, which is actually why Roy Disney is not listed as a co-producer on any of the films, but Walt still relied on Roy. So it wasn't like it was contentious thing of like, oh, I don't want Roy in the business, I'm buying him out for whatever reason. Like, it seemed very amicable because, again, it was 1929 and they worked together until Walt's death. So it wasn't like he was trying to kick him out of the company, but I guess it was just this odd thing. And Roy maybe looking out for his brother of like, okay, you want to own the company? That's fine,
Potentially, or maybe it was like a financial stability thing where Walt was saying, I'm willing to absorb the risk here and I don't want you to be on the hook. So, I mean, I'm interested to, I'd be interested to know like the reasoning behind that. If any of the listeners know what that reasoning is, it's written down in one of the books you've read, tell us, because that's fascinating.
And this is another thing I didn't know about it. So when they co-founded the studio in 1923, Roy actually served as the first CEO. Like in my mind, I think I always just assumed that Walt Disney ran the Walt Disney Company, but Walt was actually the president and Roy was the CEO. So I did not know that until kind of researching this. But again, Roy oversaw all the business decisions. So I guess it makes sense he was kind of CEO. But you just always, again, Walt Disney, he runs Walt Disney. Like you don't think of Roy Disney in any way like that.
Yeah, I do feel like it should have been like, I don't know, like just more generic, like just Disney. Also,
well, it was started as the Disney Brothers. It was Disney Brothers Studios how it started, and then it morphed into Walt Disney. Because again, I don't think Roy wanted the limelight.
Yeah,
like it was Walt's thing.
The other thing that blows my mind that there are people on this earth that walk with the last name of Disney because it is so synonymous now with the movies and the parks. That
that
it
like
is
your
to
Disney.
me like
Yeah.
it would just be so weird if that was your last name because everyone would be like, "Oh, are you related to the Disneys?" Like it would just be
Are there any Disneys that aren't? I mean, I would assume they're all related.
Yeah, I don't know.
Disneys.
It might be one of those. I mean, it could be one of those things where in a specific area, like that last name has died out, or because you don't hear it. You know that there's like Abigail Disney, but are there any others? So I don't. It's just an interesting thought. Like, what would it be like if that was your last name?
Yeah.
And would you be more inclined to going into like creative jobs because that's your last name?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Do you do that, or is it like too much pressure of trying to live up to that?
Like I read an article one time about that, like where if your name is a certain thing, sometimes it makes you more prone to get a certain job. Like they sort of like posed about like Usain Bolt and how he was
of course he's
a
gonna run
fast runner.
fast.
A fast runner. And then like there were a couple other people that were like scientists and their last name was like Weather or something, or their last name was like Rain a Lot. So it's just it's an interesting thing to think about how your name can influence you.
And then obviously a big piece of Disney history is Disneyland and kind of theme parks. So like we got past movies, and obviously like Walt pushed the medium forward. We've talked a lot about with like synchronized sound and like Technicolor and all the stuff he was doing there. And obviously Roy helped make that happen, helped kind of fund all of his creative endeavors. But then he wanted to do something bigger. He wanted to do a theme park. He wanted to do Disneyland. And Roy was like super instrumental in that. And Roy was a big part in like the television deal and like expanding Disney onto TV to get the funding from ABC for Disneyland and like the creation of the Disneyland TV show to fund all of that and kind of leveraging, Disney's success in movies and films and all that sort of stuff to kind of like get them on TV, get the funding for Disneyland. And the other thing he did, which I thought was like super smart and again, like a very like smart business move. So ABC invested $500,000 in Disneyland as part of Disneyland. Roy bought them out for $7.5 million. So like a few years after the park opened, he bought them out for $7.5 million so that way the company owned Disneyland fully.
And then, down the road.
And now it's worth billions and billions of dollars. And then down the road, Disney buys ABC.
Yeah.
But like, could you imagine if ABC would have stayed invested in that? Because I'm sure for $500K, they owned a decent chunk of the park, like I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Because I think initially they were looking for like $5 million, so maybe 10% of it. So to be able to buy them out for $7.5 million, and then just the way those parks grew, because like it would have been so odd if like ABC kind of owned a park, like it would have just been awkward. Now obviously they bought them out, so in the end of the day it wouldn't have mattered. But like that would have been a weird dynamic.
Although
having ABC involved there.
It does kind of make you wonder because Disney oftentimes would look to companies to fund
for
rides
sponsors,
and
though.
stuff.
Sponsorships, not ownership in the parks. They would fund and sponsor the rides.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm looking at it as like an investor and just like saying, okay, like give me some more money, but they wouldn't necessarily do that. But I was just thinking
it was like naming rights. I mean, like they would sell naming rights of things, but it's not like It's not like GM,
You
like
coulda
they
had,
sponsor
like-
Test Track. It's not like they own part of Epcot.
Yeah, you might have had like a Mr. Ed's Wild Ride or something instead of.
Yeah. But again,
Not
it's
to
like,
say that was on ABC. I'm sure it wasn't.
yeah, it's
but-
like ABC was getting a portion of the park. So it was smart that he bought him out. And then the Florida project, Walt Disney World, like that dream, he was very instrumental in buying all of the property in Florida. And Disney purchased all of the acreages in Florida for $5 million, which is about $182 an acre, which is so cheap.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. Like, you can't buy land anywhere for $182 an
you
acre.
Cannot.
And they bought 20
You can't
some
buy land
thousand
on
acres.
Jupiter for $182 an acre.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like you can't. Like, it's insane. And they bought 20,000 plus acres for $5 million. Like, that's all they spent for the land at Disney World. Now, I get it. It was all swamp. I think people thought it was unusable, so that's why they sold it super cheap.
Dummies buying this land.
The people selling it are
Yeah.
probably like, man, you're overpaying me at $182 an acre. But, like, obviously, like, they did not come out and say Disney was buying it. Nobody really knew who it was for. Otherwise, they might have charged them more. But even if you paid, I don't know, $500 an acre, I still feel like you're getting a good deal. But Roy was obviously like super instrumental in like that land purchase, and even building Walt Disney World or Magic Kingdom rather at first.
Yeah. The thing that's just like the most touching to me is they just seemed so like close and complimentary, to the fact that even when Walt Disney died prior to, Disney World opening,
Well,
Roy
Magic
was,
Kingdom before they even like broke ground on it.
Yeah, and like Roy, I think he was gonna retire. He postponed his retirement to be able to finish his brother's project. And then there's that story of how on opening day he tried to give the speech and he broke down and he couldn't, and he grabbed he got Mickey Mouse and held Mickey's hand when he gave the speech, and he did that because he said that's the closest thing to Walt that he could have. I mean, like, that is such a beautiful story, like really touching, and just shows just, how connected those two brothers were. And like, and to the point that Disney World opened up on October 1st, 1971. And then he was finally able to be like, okay, I can finally retire. And he died like 2 months later on December 20th of the same year. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he finished that job, and then I don't know exactly what it is that he died of.
Well,
but
yeah, and that was Magic Kingdom was Roy's park, because it was, to your point, it was Walt's dream to expand into Florida. He was instrumental in buying the land, but Walt died in 1966 before they were able to kind of break ground. They were just kind of brainstorming what it was. Roy was about to retire, and he said, yeah, I can't retire. He stepped in, and this is kind of like the first time he took like an active role in like the creative side of it. He had never really, he wasn't the one writing the scripts for the movies or like directing the animators. He was always on the business side. He wasn't, running Imagineering. And he stepped into that role and said, like, I need to take over all of this now because Walt wanted this built and I need to make this happen. And he postponed his own retirement, and then he only lived a couple months after. Like, he gave everything he had to see this vision through.
You have to kind of wonder if at this point, I mean, he was older, but if at this point
He was almost 80.
Yeah, and if at this point he enjoyed the role reversal, like, was it a massive burden and he was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how Walt does it? Or was it maybe like, like a relief? Like, because I have to imagine when you're that age and you've been doing the same thing your entire life, to get the opportunity to step into some new shoes and try something out, it might be like really scary, but I feel like that would be a part. Like, I wonder I kind of wonder if he would say that that's like one of the more like gratifying experiences of his life, is just to be able to do something different and to do it in honor of his brother.
Yeah, and I think what speaks to just Roy as like a leader in the company too is the fact that he was able to just step into that role, and that Imagineering, everybody like still followed him. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're following Walt Disney's footsteps, And so, like, to your point, Walt was very much into Imagineering. Like you said, he would just walk up to people and be like, hey, you want to try working on this? You want to try doing that? And like, I'm sure Roy had a very different kind of style, and and it's different whenever you worked with Walt and somebody like that, and you're not working with him. Like, it would be very easy for probably a creative type to be like, I don't want to listen to this guy. Like, what does he know? He's never done any of this. But the fact that like they still all kind of respected him, and he was able to kind of galvanize everybody around, like, we need to see this vision through. It's for Walt.
Yeah.
And they followed him, and he was able to see it through, I think kind of speaks volumes to it. Because, I mean, you look after Roy, the Disney company went through some CEOs that did not do well, because they were like, you don't know the business. I don't know that they had kind of the full support of, the Imagineers, kind of the people under them. But because Roy was there from the beginning, and I think Walt kind of saw him as an equal, like they worked so well together that I think everybody else in the company knew, like, hey, we're still in good hands, and Roy can lead us to where we need to go.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I know what we have on this paper about Roy Disney, but I don't, personally know a lot about Roy, but I feel like I can get a sense that he has that leadership type where people want to follow him because he's soft-spoken, and he doesn't do it for the glory of it. He was, like what he was doing was he was doing it to get a job done and to see a vision through. And I feel like there had to be like a big pep talk, like, hey, like you were saying, like, hey, this was all Walt's idea, and I want to make sure it gets done. And like he won everyone over to his side. Like it just,
I mean, if you think about it, if Magic Kingdom doesn't get built, or if Walt Disney doesn't die and he builds Magic Kingdom,
so another version of What If,
I don't think people know who Roy Disney is. I mean, I don't think, as much as he did for the company, and like we said, he was the first CEO, he was a co-founder, he helped fund all the movies, he helped get funding for Disneyland, he took care of the business side of things. I don't know that you would really know his name. I think the fact that he is most known for building Magic Kingdom, he gave the opening dedication, there's a statue of him, like, that is almost, I feel like, his claim to fame to the larger Disney public. Now, again, I think maybe like hardcore people know, like,
I was gonna say,
if you know every CEO and you know the full history of the Disney company, sure, you know who Roy is because you kind of know who everybody is. But like, I don't think a lot of people know who he is if he's not the one opening Magic Kingdom.
I mean, at the top of the episode, we said nobody knows who he is anyway.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, but like, I feel like if you say Roy Disney, people have maybe at least heard of him.
People are gonna,
because of
in
Magic
the Disney
Kingdom.
Community, their
ears
are gonna perk up.
Right. If he wasn't the one building Magic Kingdom, I think if you said Roy Disney, most people would be like, must be related to Walt Disney, something. Like that's kind of the thing. So it's one of those interesting things of like how all these little events lead to kind of where we are today. And then it's a somewhat like bittersweet ending to his story where he succeeds in opening the park and fulfilling his brother's dream, and then passes away 2 months later, and isn't able to, see Disney World grow into what it is today. Like it is bittersweet, kind of how that ends like that.
But he did do some other really interesting stuff. So Roy and Walt together created California Institute of the Arts, or as it's known more popularly, CalArts.
I didn't realize that they basically helped create that.
So they guided the 1961 merger of the LA Conservatory of Music and Chouinard Art Institute.
Yeah, which basically then led the way for CalArts. Like, that didn't create CalArts right away, but that was kind of like the groundwork. But like, Walt's basically vision was to try to expand like the art community in LA. And like him and Roy again, it's like an odd history. Like it was like a guided merger, but then there was still like it was like a framework, and it kind of continued on.
Yeah,
before it eventually became CalArts.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting way that he did that too, because it basically, when we talked to like Tom and Tony Bancroft, it kind of sounded like, CalArts is sort of a funnel to Disney. So
right, because
he
they
was
creating
he's creating something that he could get some of the very best of talent from them to come and work for him. So it was a very like intelligent thing to do.
Yeah, he was building out that like infrastructure within LA, like to have that pipeline for animators. And then Roy's son, Roy E. Disney, so this is kind of like legacy, his family legacy, was a part of not one but two Save Disney campaigns. So the first one in 1989, which brought Michael Eisner on, and the second one in 2005, which got rid of Michael Eisner and brought on Bob Iger. So once Roy O had passed away, Roy E. Disney kind of took on the role as like the Disney family representative kind of on the company to a certain extent. Like he was on the board for a long time, obviously was a large shareholder, being like part of the Disney company. And then, was involved in not one, but two Save Disney campaigns. But which like, if you don't know about the Save Disney campaigns, like go look them up. Maybe we'll do some episodes on them in the future. Cause like they were wild. Like some of the stuff that was going on with these like whole Save Disney campaigns.
Yeah. So I do think like it's kind of sad that there's no Disney family members really.
There's Abigail Disney. I mean, she's kind of like the one out there, but she's more like outspoken against the company.
Yeah, I was going to say, but like not like heavily involved.
Right.
Because I feel like that maybe is also, talking about what's maybe missing in the company. It might be that like this is a family business sense. Like I feel like, that maybe it's getting a bit corporate, like sometimes it feels.
Yeah, I mean, but it feels very corporate.
Well, it's very corporate, but sometimes it does feel like, we don't remember necessarily the people at the heart of this every now and again when they make decisions. So I feel like that would kind of help balance that out a little.
I mean, in Walt's biography, I mean, there is a story where like somebody told Walt, like, don't go public. Like the second you sell a share of your company public, like you've lost all control of your company. And, I wonder if like Walt ever regretted it. I'm not sure, because at the end of the day, he needed all that money. Like he needed the funds to kind of get to where he was. But I'm sure if he could have owned it himself and not had to bring in outside investors, he would have, because I think obviously then you have more control over it. But you're right. I mean, the second you do that, then you're beholden to investors, Wall Street. Like it becomes so corporate.
Making money, and as opposed to necessarily churning out like the best product that you possibly can.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't be where we are today
without Roy.
Without Roy. As much
Roy
as
O.
Roy O. Disney, yes. Roy E. Disney too. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Great as well.
Without two Save Disney campaigns, you wouldn't be there. Again, kind of the legacy of Roy O. being a steward of the company. And again, Walt was a creative side, but Roy was just as important, because I don't think Walt would have been able to achieve his creative endeavors the way he wanted to if it wasn't for Roy kind of balancing out the practicality side of things and the reality of what does it mean to build an amusement park? Well, we need money for that. How are we going to get that money? What do we want to do with these films? We need distribution. We need all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just phenomenal. And so hopefully, shed a little bit of light. I mean, there's a lot more about Roy Disney. There's a lot of like biographies on him if you're interested in learning more. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.